My name is Laura Elizabeth Willett, and I'm an author. So, West Girls is a novel in stories out now through Scribe Publications. It is a story that takes place mostly in WA and takes the perspectives of multiple girls and women living and working in WA. So, among them, there's a mining heiress, a cosmetic nurse, a West Coast Eagles wife. But the most important character is a girl called Luna Lewis, who is an ethnically ambiguous looking teenager who um, finds international modeling success by reinventing herself as Luna Liu. West Girls is my fourth book. I had a collection of short stories called The Love of the Bad Man, published in 2016. Also, a historical fiction novel, Beautiful Revolutionary, which came out in 2018. And my last book before this one was The Newcomer in 2021. That was a work of literary crime fiction about a murder victim and her mother, so taking those perspectives. And the biggest difference with West Girls from these works is that it wasn't based on a true crime, and it's also set in my home state, WA. In 2017, I did an AsiaLink Arts residency in Jakarta, where I actually lived in Jakarta for 9 weeks. And while I was there, I was supposed to be working on personal essays about my family, but I ended up writing 3 short stories while I was there instead. And those stories I came back to during the pandemic when I was sort of not feeling too inspired with what I was working on at the time. And that separation from WA for 2 years while living in Melbourne, something made me really interested in writing about WA, and it also made me think of new connections between these characters and other characters who could fill their world. I think the fact that West Girls originated as short stories is quite evident in its structure. But also, as a novelist, I have always enjoyed employing more than one perspective, jumping around in time a bit. I tend to get bored if I'm just, telling the story from one perspective in a linear manner for the whole book. So that jumping around isn't new to me. But in particular with West Girls, one thing I really wanted to play with was the idea of degrees of separation when living in Perth. So Perth is a city which I think largely because of its isolation and also because it's not a huge city. You can talk to someone, and after talking for a certain amount of time, you can discover you have people in common. You can talk to someone and find out they know someone who's smoked a bong with Sam Worthington, whatever. So I really wanted to capture that aspect of Perth in the structure of this book. I'm often told that I write unlikable characters. I really dislike that description. I think when we talk about people in terms of likability and unlikability, that is often a reflection of the reader and the biases they're actually bringing into the work, rather than objective qualities about a person. So when I'm writing my characters, I don't think of whether I like them or not. I'm more interested in whether they are authentic, whether they feel like real people, whether they're interesting. And yeah, I really enjoy just being in the headspace of a character who's different to me, or having a character who might respond differently to a situation that I've been in myself, but, react in a totally different way. The hypotheticals of that is always really fascinating to me and something I enjoy experimenting with. There's a certain amount of power that beauty can bestow on a person, but that power is very precarious and very potentially short-lived. So I really wanted to explore the lives of these women who have maybe made the decision to make a career out of being beautiful, or have gained some sort of power in society through their beauty. And the way that, because of the precarity that comes with that, they do find themselves in these situations where they are trying to cling to the power, or else grieving its loss in some way or another. So that was a big thing with Luna's story. I was a failed teen model, so like Luna, I was obsessed with Vogue when I was a teenager. I saw modelling as a way out of Perth, and I grew up at a time where Gemma Ward was one of the biggest models internationally, and the fact that she was from Perth meant a lot and kind of inspired me. But yeah, like Luna, I entered a model search when I was about 16 and got to go on stage and got some attention at school the next week, but it never really went anywhere from there. And I saved up money from my factory job and bought some portfolio photos, which weren't very good, and went around to a couple of agencies and basically got the feedback that you're not quite competitive enough to do this, you know. And so that was something which I think was interesting to me as a hypothetical for a long time, because I did have that teenage experience, and I did think, oh, what if I did have what it took, or what if I did find a way into that world? What might that have looked like? As far as research goes, I also read this amazing book called The Most Beautiful Job in the World by Julia Mentesiari. And that was all about the fashion industry and the exploitativeness of that industry, the precariousness of fashion work, and really how very few people actually get to be like the industry geniuses and superstars, and how many people they depend on to get to that position. So the less glamorous side of that industry was something I enjoyed researching. And I also did a lot of research into cosmetic nursing. I listened to hours and hours of a podcast called Inside Aesthetics, which is by a couple of guys working in that industry who interview specialists every episode. And yeah, I got really into the science of that and the craft involved in that kind of work, but also all the horrible things that can go wrong. I wanted to explore appropriation through a character who has a similar background to myself. So like myself, Luna is Anglo-Maltese, but she grows up in a blended family, has an Indonesian stepmother, and she goes to a public school where most of her friends are Asian. So there's this sense that she has, because she doesn't really fit into the world of like her Anglo blonde classmates, she feels like she's not fully white. And I think that makes her feel entitled to assume another identity, even though she still has all the privileges that come from being white. So yeah, I wanted to show the logic of a person in that situation and not just show it as this, you know, random horrible act that they happen to commit. There's, you know, a basis for it in her upbringing and stuff. At the same time, I also wanted to explore a character arc of somebody who is under threat of cancellation. So I think a lot of people in the public eye fear being cancelled. But the thing is, when people are cancelled, often, you know, there's a bit of a stir, a lot of noise for about a week, and then a lot of nothing. And what happens after that? And I think whether or not that person remains in the public eye, whether or not they feel bad about what they did, the structures that allowed them to flourish often stay in place. So I wanted to have an appropriation story that might not necessarily be morally satisfying for readers, but does reflect the world we live in. I try not to put too much stake in awards. I think they are not necessarily a measure of objective quality of a work so much as what a judging panel can agree on. And often the same kinds of books get rewarded again and again. So if you don't happen to write one of those books, or you know, you just have a year where the people in the judging panel, you're not really their thing, like, I try not to take it personally. But at the same time, awards do have this huge financial value for authors, and that can't be understated because a lot of authors don't have much money. I think also scholarships, I've been lucky to have a few grants and that sort of thing over the years, which have really shaped my career and have allowed me to take time out of other work. So I've always had, you know, retail work or call center work or something else going on alongside writing, but those opportunities that allow you to focus on writing more exclusively are so valuable. In many ways, 2020 was actually a very financially stable year for me. I happened to get funding at that time, and I also had access to JobKeeper payments through my day job at the time. So I was actually earning a more steady income than I had in previous years and than I have since. Um, so there was actually, some stability in that time for me, which did allow me to get some good thinking done. But I didn't necessarily feel like writing at the time. And it always felt, in the moment, like all my progress was slow and like nothing I did really mattered in the scheme of all this chaos that was going on. And it was only really in 2022 when I was able to see my family in WA for the first time in 2 years that I think my thinking focused and that I actually felt very passionate about this project. My current project that I'm working on, I've been doing a little bit of research into Sylvia Plath for that project. So when I encountered a new novel called But the Girl by Jessica Jean Mayu, yeah, I loved that. It was a great book, and I've been aware of Jessica's writing for a while, her short stories and stuff, but this is her first novel. It follows a young Malaysian Australian woman who is doing a PhD on Sylvia Plath and does a residency in the UK to kind of do that research. And her relationships with her family, with her body, with her art, all of it's explored in this really unique and ambivalent sort of way. There's just a lot of depth to her writing. I'm actually working on my first nonfiction book. I can't say too much about what it's about, but yeah, it kind of blends memoir, cultural analysis, interviews, and medical research. So it's a big change of direction and a big challenge. Thank you.